Hello, it's Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada. I am in Arizona at some of the car collection auctions, and now it's time. I just wanted to go through some of the Gooding offerings. And like I said with RM, I mean, there's a pretty strict vetting process to get your car into this auction. I've had many nice cars refused, even though they're perfectly good cars. So you have some confidence that just about anything you buy here is going to be a good car, is going to be gone through a vetting process. David Gooding, who I have a lot of admiration for, and who his whole life has been surrounded with classic cars. I think his dad was a curator for like the Bill Haraz Imperial Palace Museum, if I'm not mistaken. If not that, another big museum. He's known a lot of these pre-war cars since he was a boy, even, and he's at every auction. And he auctions the cars with Charlie Whitting, the point being is that they're all good cars. And if there is a problem, he'll actually announce that on the auction block. So, in terms of assessing a value for the car, you've got for RM and Gooding and Bonhams, they have a pre-auction estimate. These are normally always high. Only in a booming market, a classic car market, would you see the actual results uniformly at the auction estimate or above. It's been a declining market for several years, and so normally in the last few years we've expected the auction estimates to be optimistic, and many of the items to sell at their low estimate or below, and very few to sell above their high estimate. Okay, but that said, I can't really assess the cars again without more analysis into the documentation, restoration, all that kind of stuff. So I'll just walk through and I'll just pick out, just give you my overall comments about what's here. For what it's worth, it's kind of fun. If you haven't been to one of these auctions, it's great. It's it's a real treat. And this is, these are the best of the best. Let me say that, in this declining market for the really expensive stuff, first of all, the consigners are generally choose Monterey to sell the over $10 million stuff, the really expensive cars. And then in a declining market, a lot of the heavy stuff is just going to stay home because nobody wants to take a chance. That said, there's some immediate trends. One is the more young timers, of course, and a lot more unrestored cars. You never used to see that before. So let me turn this around and I'll give you a brief walkthrough of what... Here we've got the Land Cruiser. This one's looks like it's unrestored, which actually might bring as much as a restored one. They rust very badly, and so if that's the original paint, then this car has been extremely well preserved. They want 50 to 70 for it, and it says it only has 14,000 miles, so that's a real rarity. Most of these have just rusted. The reason you see checkerboard on the rear quarters is because there's just nothing left of the rear metal. Okay, so Alpha Spider, early Porsche Targa, 1973 2.4T, probably $80,000 car, 360 Volkswagen Bug. We have some American muscle cars again, and some cheaper cars for Gooding in Arizona. Nice early Jag E-Type Series 1. There's just about one in every auction. 914-6, they didn't make too many of those. That's a race car. And this is looks like a 328 BMW. It's a great car. Same engine as after the war, the technology for this car was transferred to Bristol. So the English company Bristol had a version of this 326 engine. Carrera GT, again, they made 1,400 of them. There's just about one at every auction. MG and another Healy BG8. That's kind of a funny color on that one. I don't know that that's stock. SLR, there's one at every auction. 599 GTO, some late model cars. Here's some Porsches, RS 4.0. So these have held their value despite most of the other Porsches tanking. And the reason for that's a numbered car, so 1 is 600. So these are still $300,000 cars, 930 turbo, E-Type. Again, this is all fairly standard stuff. Well, that's interesting. That's chartreuse. That is one of my favorite colors, and I did a targa in this color, and I call it lind green, I'm pretty sure. Light green, lind green, yeah, or chartreuse, which is one of my favorite Porsche colors. I did a targa in it, sold it to this Calgary lady, and I based that color on a RS 2.7 that was at Amelia Island. One of my favorite Porsche colors. Okay. All right, a nice 911 SC Targa, Mercedes 190E 2.3 Cosworth Evo. So that's the final evolution of that. Not sure what this is. Probably Fiat 1100 coupe. So there's a lot of really fancy stuff that can be built on a Fiat 1100 coupe, including a car that Calgary got restored, and it was an Abarth, Gia-bodied Abarth that had the basis of this engine in just about one Pebble Beach with it after restoring the car himself. It's a fantastic story. I'd maybe even like to tell that story on YouTube later. 944 Mercedes 280 SE 3.5 Cabriolet. So there's a coupe here as well. And these are gorgeous. The last of the real handmade cars. I had a coupe of this once. Sensational car. These have always been expensive. Even when I just started taking an interest in collector car values 30 years ago, this was still an $80,000 or $100,000 car. This car's never been a cheap car. Everybody's always considered it a classic. It was Ralph Lauren's first expensive car when he started selling his polo ties and started making some money. This was the first car that he bought, the first nice car, and he says that he'll never sell it. Okay, so that's Ralph Lauren. Another Continental, again, beautiful. There was one at RM as well, and you know how much I like those. These are the big Rolls Royces. There was a really crappy one at Russo and Steel, and this is a Cloud, and it's Cloud 2, so that's the first of the V8 cars, and it doesn't look perfect. Looks like it's got some paint issues in it, but at least it looks like the paint's been on the car for a very long time, and the interior looks good. So again, I don't know when this paint was done, but we can see some flaws in it. What's the story on this one? Single family ownership for 50 years. So it's probably a great car, although for painting it, you're going to need to add $25,000 to the bill. But a car that's had a paint job that's 25 or 30 years old, probably, that's showing some cracking and a little bit of corrosion, is far preferable to a new crappy paint job. So at least you know what's underneath it. It looks like a gorgeous car and great colors. I've never seen this two-tone treatment, so presumably it was repainted, halfway through the vehicle's life. All right, G-Wagons 403. Is that a Peugeot? Yeah, that's interesting. Never seen that before. It's kind of a cool car. 403 Estate, Woody Wagon. What do we got over here? 993 Turbo. Of course, they soared in value. They made 5,000 of those, so there's always going to be a lot on the market. The best ones bring close to 200 US, and there's a Turbo S version as well. So this is Zagato Alpha Giulietta. So any Zagato Alpha is worth a lot. BMW M1. So these have really shot up in value. Testarossa. All right. Late model Ferrari. Another Alfa Romeo Montreal. So there was one in RM as well. This one looks a little bit nicer though. Wheels look corroded and so on. Great color on that car. All right, so let's see what else we have here. Let's go around. So there's some of the expensive stuff here. I won't comment on it too much. This looks like a Super America or a Super Fast. What is this one? These are gorgeous. Super Fast. So it's spectacular cars, big heavy car, but extremely expensive new, and everyone's a little bit different. Like this, you know, one of my favorite. I like the top values goes to the racing cars, but I love these big Grand Tours. I just think. All right, 911S 2.2, first generation GT3, another early 911. That looks like a very early car. When is this? 67, so that's the second year of production. And that's the first year of production of the S. Okay, so then there was numerous things. Go ahead. There was numerous things that set this car apart: the trim, the interior, the dash, the wheels. This is the first Fuchs wheel. Fuchs wasn't in the wheel business until Porsche commissioned them, and this was the start of it. And the first wheels are very narrow. They're like 4.5 inches wide. Just not scratch this thing here. And beautiful interior, and it's pretty hard to fault. You know, there's unique basket weave dash material. I'm not sure the seats are original fabric, but they look nice. Anyway, got a period correct sunroof on it. What else do we got here? 246 GT. This is pardon me? Not a chairs and flares. It has got the simpler pattern seats, and these would have come with vinyl seats as well. So an M6, you know, very lovely Grand Touring machine, and even the best ones are only 50, 60 grand. Wonderful cars. SEC Mercedes 126. Of course, you know that's one of my favorite. And in my opinion, this is one of the best. What do you think? 23,000 miles. In my opinion, the 126 Mercedes, the sedans and the coupes, are the most finest constructed and most durable post-war cars. I've been driving them for 20 years, and I think they're magnificent. Daytona, okay, well, one of the all-time greats. They've fallen in value. They used to be pushing $800,000-900,000, but now we're seeing them back down in the 4 or 5 range. It costs you 4 or 5 to restore it. So, you know, I think Daytona's a really solid buy. Jag XK140 and some late model stuff. 550 Barquette. I remember having one of these for sale, and I think we were trying to get $185,000, and now I think they went up to about 450. Now they're dropped to 3. Late model Ferraris. There's lots of guys commenting on these, so this is alone. Ford GT. Some really silly money being paid for them. Ford tried to keep a really tight grip on the resale, but again, cars went free. I don't really see it, because I think they're making another batch of them. You know, so I think my opinion on the late model exotics is that you shouldn't really be paying any more than list price for these cars, because since most of them are in production, they can be replaced. It means they're not really collectible cars, because you can make another one. And so because you can make another one, I don't see them trading at a multiple of their list prices. But there's a market for it, and people keep bidding them up, and we'll see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me there's so many late model collectibles at inflated prices, the Pagani's and so on, that it just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's just my opinion.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Jag XK220. So this had a really difficult gestation. You know, it was supposed to have a V12 engine and 4-wheel drive, and it showed up with a V6. Still a very fast and collectible car. I remember offering one for $200,000 not that long ago, and now they've probably doubled to the 3 and the 4. They've got fuel cells and some other expensive maintenance requirements on them. But you know, go ahead. It's a great period piece. It was the fastest car in the world when it came out. And it's long and it's wide and it's not that practical, but I think kind of standing the test of time. It was overshadowed by the McLaren F1, which is another one of its problems because it was contemporary.
What's wrong with this car?
Pardon me?
It's so cheap.
They've never been expensive.
400 grand? I mean,
No, they've never been expensive.
I just sold one in St. Louis at 6 or 7. But I hear you can't maintain it.
No, you can, I think.
Fuel tanks and
They've got a fuel
carburation.
cell, but so do lots of cars.
Yeah.
So F40 has a fuel cell. I just don't. Like I said, I had one.
beautiful.
I had one for sale for 200 grand, not that long
they were a
ago,
couple years ago.
and then nobody cared. And then I think
They took it.
Rob Myers bought like 30 of them from the factory or something. Like he bought the entire stock. There's some story about that. And I've only ever
Is he peddling them out one at a time? Or
Well,
something? 'Cause he buys a lot of his inventory.
that was a long time ago.
Oh.
And I don't know. You're on YouTube video, by the way. I've only ever seen them go as high as 450 or 5, and I've seen them at a low of,
This only got 600 miles.
200.
That's-
None of them have been driven.
No. That's what I hear, that you can't drive them. Yeah, that's right. That's why they sent
But it's a buy. It's a buy. I think at that price it's a buy. And there's a car like the same era that I like a little bit more, and that's the XJR15. That was the
that's-
carbon fiber.
You're right. Before
racing
this one,
car.
though, wasn't it? Right before this or right after
91,
this?
before.
Yeah, it's a 93 and 4.
Yeah, it was before that, and they raced them 3 times.
Yeah, I saw
I
him
them.
one. He was on Lino's thing.
Yeah, it's a great car.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great.
Magnificent.
Looks great.
But it's like if you look at what this is, and then you look at an F50, and then the F50 is like $2 million, and
Yeah.
this is $450,000, and you think, well, what's the difference? Well, I mean, there's differences, but one's not worth 5 times as much.
This is a big car. Man, it must be hard to drive.
Yeah, I know.
See how-
Can't see it. I remember one of my memories was going to the Montreal Grand Prix. Lawrence Stroll, who owns Mont Tremblant, the F1 team, is the father of Lance Stroll. He always had all the fanciest cars. You couldn't import these, so it had like a European plate. And at the Montreal weekend, where everybody's out in the cafes, then Lawrence has this parked in some parked in front of some fancy restaurant. But it took 3 spotters to get him out of his parking spot.
See, that's driving for a lot of different reasons.
All right, so we got, this is part of fun about Gooding, is you just run into supercar enthusiasts, and it's just fun. All right, so 964 Turbo Cabriolet. Now this is Amazon Green. Oh, actually, it's a 964 America Roadster, sorry. So the body of the turbo. Amazon Green, which is this blue-green, another one of my favorites. It's, I was going to paint that maritime blue roof this color, but I didn't, but that was second on the list. Okay, late model McLaren, you can find it anywhere. Late model Ferrari, find it anywhere. Late model Ferrari, find it anywhere. John Smack. You're on. My friend John here. I'm just doing a YouTube video on some of these cars.
Oh, great.
I'll pause it for a second here. Who then said, "Oh, well, did you run into this guy Dave? You know, you sold him this M6, like this exact car." So it's funny. I did the recommissioning on this car and sold it to a Calgary collector, and he put it in Gooding. So anyway, I think I might have even done a video on this car earlier on my channel. Anyway, it's a great example of an M6. Paid tons of money for the correct TRX tires on this and redid the air suspension. But a really great original paint, original leather car. It's a great example. Okay, and then where were we? We were looking at late model Ferraris. Okay, you can just walk into any dealership and get them. McLarens, you can just get them anywhere. No big deal about that. You get a little bit desensitized to, you know, $300,000 or $400,000 cars at these auctions because everybody has one. So what is this? 330 or 365? 330 GTC. Great touring Ferraris. The 365 is a bigger engine. Looks similar. What else do we have? Looks like an Offenhauser. Yeah, it's an Offenhauser engine. There's a car in Calgary that showed up at my Coffee and Cars, something called a Tommy Lee Special, and it had an Offenhauser engine. I think this is even the same engine, which would be just ridiculous if it was. and it had it was apparently the largest engine they ever made. So that's interesting. These engines were used in the Curtiss cars and Indy cars, and in very, very few road cars. So I don't know, this is weird. I'm half expecting this Tommy Lee special to be here too. Let's see what it says on this thing here. Well, George Tillett. No, it's a different engine installed in an Aston DB2. Well, the Aston DB2, that was the car that I said had the engine problems, so that's no surprise there. And then it was in a Ferrari Mondial, and this is a 180 cubic inch. So I think the one in the Calgary is larger than that. Anyway, great piece. Okay, so let's look at some of the Mercedes Roadsters. Again, not too much. They're all going to be perfect. They're all $1 million cars. They're all blue chip cars. A 400i Ferrari. So I'm a little bit more interested in these because they're a little bit more attainable. And again, these cars weren't worth that much at all for a long time. $25,000, $30,000. And as a result, many of them aren't in great condition. So if you can find a good preserved original car, and this one looks it, they're a great deal because you probably $50,000 or $60,000, maybe a little bit more, you can get one of these for. And I like the 70s wedge. Now this would be similar to some other 70s cars. So you can see a little Aston Lagonda in it. You can see a little Fiat 130 coupe in it. You can see those styling elements. But anyway, I think it's terrific. Another E-Type Jag, Corvette, Healey. So this is a 3000. So we saw the videos of the 104s and the Mark III BJ8. This would have been the 106 would have been the first Healey with the 6-cylinder, and then they made it a 3000. And the big difference is a bigger engine, better engine, with a different head and disc brakes. Okay, but this one still has. This is a 2-seat, so there's no seats behind it. And it still has the snap-on side screens. I prefer this car to the later BJ8s, even though the BJ8s are worth quite a bit more, just because it's a simpler and purer expression. I like this and the 104 as well. The 6 has a lot of grunt, and it sounds just fantastic. It sounds like you're driving a fighter plane when you're driving it. Okay, GT2 997. Another Porsche. Here's some unrestored Porsches. They bring astonishing money in this condition, and they don't even clean them up when they cross the block. Sometimes these cars go for as much or more than the restored cars, which is hard to fathom, but at least you know what you're starting with. And an unrestored 356 that isn't rusted is quite amazing, and so that's what people are looking at. This is the this looks like the Roadster with a hardtop on it, 1600. So it'll bring big money, there's no question about it, as much as a restored one, I predict. Okay, and then let's see what else is here. Mercedes 280 SE 3.5 coupe. So we've seen the convertible. I've owned one of these coupes, and this was one of the very first injected cars with the Bosch CIS injection, and it had the Mercedes M117 engine, which is carried over all the way to 1991 in the 560 SELs and the 126 cars. Same engine as in my 420 SEL, and a lovely thing that I wish I hadn't have sold. This one looks like we've got a kind of a swing arm rear suspension. And this one looks like its rear tires are a little bit off camber, but maybe it's just not sitting that well after transport. 328, so affordable Ferrari. This is, you can tell by the concave wheels that it's pre-1988 and a half. I've owned one of these cars, and they're actually not that, you don't have to take the engine out to service them, and anybody can work on them. Same injection system as the Mercedes, actually, CIS, and not that fast by today's standards, but still Fun car. It's still a Ferrari. It still makes all the right noises, and I enjoy driving mine a lot. I wouldn't say this, a 355, is easy to maintain. This is one of the cars where you have to take the engine out, and not just take the engine out, but basically disassemble the rear of the car. And the servicing on these cars can be quite astronomical compared to the value. You could spend $25,000 on a major service on a 355 when the car's only worth $70,000 or $80,000. Like, you know, literally a third the value of the car in a service, which is crazy. And it's not that satisfying either, because it'll be like, you know, your exhaust manifold crack. They're known for that. And the car can only have 10,000 miles on it. You can buy exhaust manifolds, and they're like $5,000 a piece, at least in Canada. So it's these. I'd way rather have a 328 just because the maintenance is just a whole lot simpler. Corvettes. This is one of these Zagato Aston Martins. What is it called? AM1s or something like that. I can't remember. DBAR1. So that's basically a Jaguar XJS morphed into a DB7 with a funny body on it. It says Zagato, but it's underneath. This is an 80s, 70s Jag. It's a lovely thing, and but they're never going to be that collectible just because of their underpinnings. They're always about $200,000 or something like that. Okay, so another Ferrari, V8 Ferrari. That's a 308. You can see it's different than the 328, and looks like it's sitting a little bit high. And then the one to have on these is the Quattro Valvoli, which is 83 to 85. This is just the GTSI, so this is a 3-liter, again, CIS injected engine. And at that era, not very powerful. 204 horsepower, I think, from memory. Another Jag, XK140, 120, okay, without the spats. What else do we got? Shelby, trio of Rolls Royces, 997 GT3 RS, a Talbot Lego. Ooh. Well, that's special. This isn't an original though. What is this? It's got a badge on it that says designer and coach builder John Toom, and it's got a Jaguar straight six. So this would have been a recreation inspired by the pre-war Talbot Lego T150. You know, who knows? It's got a resemblance to it, but it's different in many respects. I'm sure it took a lot of money to build and took a long time. Ferrari 308 GT4. So I like these, I think, better than the 308s, just because they have this great 70s style. And you know, they're a four-seat mid-engine car is not an easy thing to design. So I think this is really successful. They were unloved forever. And then cheap. They were the cheapest Ferrari, $25,000, along with a Mondale. Now they've come up a lot, but I just think it's great. The first and only Bertoni designed Ferrari. All the rest are Pininfarina right now. This is a Maybach. That's the stretched version. So these, I sold these. Well, I didn't sell one, but these were for sale when I was at the Mercedes dealership in 2003, so I was there for the unveiling of this car. They've depreciated a lot, and now this would have been probably close to $500,000 new. I have to stand pretty far back to get it in the picture. Today it might be $100,000. So you know, I look at these and think, well, you know, like if you can get one with a divider, that means I can throw the kids in the back and then put the divider up, and I don't have to hear them screaming. Well, that's a pretty good thing. So, you know, I think even some short wheelbase ones are down to $60,000, which is a hell of a lot of car for the money. 356C, so this is the latest 356 disc brake. So I had one of these as well, and it's a lovely thing. Lightweight, nimble, skinny tires. I mean, it's just a happy, eager, just a great car. Great car, and not that expensive. They were $30,000, $40,000, and they jumped up to $100,000. Now they're back down to, you know, 50, 60 or something like that. Okay, so let's look at some of these rolls. More than anything else, there's good and there's bad with the Rolls Royces. You know, the first thing I do is I look at the tires and coupes, and what you really want to see is an Avon, or I know it's a hard size to get, but I just hate these tires on it. And of course, this one looks original, which is good. This must be from the late 80s or early 90s. 88. Of course they made this from the 70s, and here's a Cloud, and this must be a coach-built car. I don't recognize it. This is a Silver Cloud 2. That's the first of the V8. Again, you really need to look at those carefully. And let's see what this is. It's almost got like pre-war headlights grafted on a post-war body. It's kind of unusual. So this is a Phantom 5 touring limousine, body by James Young. Okay, so this is the big limo. It's bigger than the Cloud. And yeah, magnificent cars, actually. I mean, and they're not worth that much, you know. Maybe there's your divider there. You know, maybe, I don't know what the estimate is, but you know, this car could go for as little as $100,000, $125,000. And for that, just look at this thing. Like, it's just like, I don't know where you'd park it or what you'd do with it, but it's just like a magnificent thing. This one's got lots of flaws. It costs you an absolute fortune to restore it. I mean, absolutely. Probably spend $500,000 restoring that car, but this one does look funny with these headlights. I don't know what's going on with those. Okay, so let's see what else we have. And all right, Isata Frasinchini, glorious, expensive car. You know what? I got it wrong. It's a Duesenberg. Sorry. Anyway, magnificent. I don't know too much about those, obviously. Okay, and here's another Defender. We saw one at Russo and Steel. This one looks like so this isn't a 97. This is an NAS Defender. So they brought in, not sure, they brought in 500 of the 110s. I'm not sure how many of these, but this was sold new in the US. It's got a V8 engine, manual gearbox, I'm sure. And these have never been, oh no, this is an automatic, okay. These have never been cheap. I remember negotiating to buy one when it was new, and they couldn't sell them, and it was $38,000, and the sales lady said she'd give it to me for $32,000, and I didn't. And that was probably the cheapest you could ever buy a Land Rover Defender, and then they just stayed at $40,000, $50,000, and no matter how much mileage was on them. So I should have bought that car. And we have some old Americana, and looks like there's an old Porsche at the end here. So, well, that one's got the Rudge knockoff wheels, which is kind of cool. It's an early car. You can see the headlights are a lot lower down. On the later cars, this looks like this is a 356A. On the B's and the C's, the headlights are up more. Gorgeous car. I love the green interior too. I can't speak to the value of it, again, not without going through the documentation, which can affect the cars a lot. Certainly looks very nice though, and I love the black on it. So we'll leave it at that. Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, down at the Gooding auction. And I hope I gave you a taste for what's available here. And if you get the chance, it's even if you're not bidding on anything, the admission's like $40. It's just wonderful to see all these cars. And then, of course, you run into the people you know as well from all over the world that come here. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe.